a lot of people ask me all the time, like, how can I bring more laughter into my life? And I say, just take one thing that you normally do and laugh. And so my daughter, every time she sneezes, she laughs. And so it cracks us all up. And so now I've started, like, every time I sneeze, I laugh
Laugh.
too, because she's
Okay.
got me in the habit. But it's that simple. That's how you bring more laughter into your life. Like every time you take a sip of tea, you just laugh for that few seconds. It's not about like putting something else on your list and you're not going to do it or do it. It's just every time you start your car, just laugh for that few seconds. And then
Cool.
all of a sudden, like, you've got all this laughter in your life, you know?
Welcome to Lived In by Zoe Therapy Services. I'm your host, Micah Faye, and I'm excited to share with you a community of experts who specialize in helping you feel fantastic. That's what Lived In aims to be, an online hub for DIY wellness led by the experts and curated by folks who care. In this wellness series, I interview Richmond community leaders, vendors, and healers to empower you with a toolkit, one filled with healthy practices to make every day just a little bit better. So welcome to Lived In, your online comfy couch surrounded by friends and supported by experts. Come on in. We're excited to have you. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Lived In. I'm your host, Micah Faye, and today we are here with Coleman, who is not only a laughter yoga teacher, but is also the founder of Laughter Yoga Richmond. I have never heard of laughter yoga. What is that?
I think the majority of people in the world haven't heard of it. It's a fairly new kind of addition to the mindfulness movement. It just came about in 1995.
Okay.
You think about yoga, which I love. I consider myself a professional yoga student. There's a yoga center now, like on every corner, and all kinds of different types of yoga you can join. But laughter yoga, there's one book that's been written about the subject. It just came out last year by the doctor that created laughter yoga. Yoga has tons of bookshelves filled with it. And so not many people know about it. Not many people have heard of it. So laughter yoga was started in 1995. There was a medical doctor in India named Dr. Madan Gataria who found that with his patients, he could get better results if he could get them to laugh for sustained durations of time instead of using traditional medicine. And so he came up with this kind of revolutionary idea. He took his wife and two friends to a park and formed the world's first joke club in March of 1995. And he thought that he could get that kind of healthy laughter by telling jokes. And it was a huge disaster. The first session of the first joke club lasted about, I don't know, less than 3 minutes. They might have known one knock joke and someone else told a joke. And they said, well, let's regroup tomorrow. Maybe if we bring more people in, more jokes, it'll get the kind of laughter we want. He found with more jokes, it didn't encourage more laughter. Some people thought the jokes were hilarious and just smiled. And to get the health benefits, he knew that you had to laugh sustained for more than 10 minutes. And so at the end of the week, that first week, 50 people had joined. And at that point, there were a lot of jokes. Some people heard the jokes before, and what happens when you hear a joke again is you don't think it's funny. And so that's when the jokes started to get mean and a little dirty. And a lot of people were like, we don't want any parts of this. And that's when the doctor remembered in his days in amateur theater in high school, where the body can't tell the difference between an emotion that's real and an emotion that's simulated. Yeah. And so, when we're an actor on stage and we act angry, our blood pressure rises, our face gets red, our bodies get tight, our muscles get tight. Mm-hmm. And he felt that maybe it could be the same with laughter. And so he developed that night, based on his work in the theater, this one laughter exercise. He brought it to the group the next day in this park in Mumbai, Lullaby Park. And he used it the first time, and it generated laughter for about 3 to 5 minutes. He did it again, another 3 to 5 minutes of laughter. It was a revolutionary idea because it was based on unconditional laughter, meaning there are no conditions for laughter. And so it's not based on comedy, jokes, or humor. After a few years, he maybe had 10 foundational exercises, and he could get groups to laugh for 60 minutes. And all kinds of amazing health benefits and things happen when you get the body to laugh for that long, which I'm happy to talk about in a little while. But, 5 years later, in that same park, 50,000 people joined him in the park in Mumbai. And that's when he was like, I think I really have something here. And so he put his medical practice in the back seat. He opened up Laughter Yoga University, started Laughter Yoga International as a nonprofit. and just started spreading what he called these free social laughter clubs around the world. And now, since '95, they've spread to hundreds of countries, and in India alone, just in Mumbai, there's like 18,000 free laughter clubs, and so that gives you a sense of like how it's spread. In India there's definitely more. There's more laughter clubs there, but it's spread all around the world, really.
Wow.
So that's kind of like the longer answer of, what is laughter yoga?
Yeah. So, I actually went to theater school, and we do this exercise where you alternate between laughter and crying, because your body's instinct and what it's actually doing, your physiology is the same when you do both. So your heart rate rises, your breathing extends, your face scrunches up. So the idea is that your body doesn't know which emotion you're actually feeling. It just knows that you are in a state. So we practice. It's hilarious. Like, I'm sure as a laughter yoga teacher, you would love to see a bunch of theater students being like, ha, 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 ah, for a long time. It's really funny. But I did learn in theater school the same thing that you learned when you were studying laughter yoga. So that's kind of cool. So then I'm curious, what are the benefits of laughing for a long time?
Yeah, so some pretty cool things happen, and it kind of to explain that, I can explain how I got into it a little bit. So I've been a professional storyteller for almost 15 years, performing stories about Richmond all over the world, really.
Wow.
And I was on TV. I've had a couple PBS specials, in books, and on stage, like everywhere. And I was on my book tour in 2015, and my right lung mysteriously collapsed. I've been living in New York City for about 4 years, and I'd come down here back to Richmond for Thanksgiving, and I went into St. Mary's, and I had 3 surgeries. I was one of those rare cases with a lung collapse, where the 1 in 1 million chance this surgery might not work. I was that person, and so I stayed in the hospital for almost a month. And after the 3rd surgery, when I was finally ready to be released, the doctor said that laughing, coughing, and sneezing would help my lung heal. And so I had gone from almost 10 years of probably touring like 200 days out of the year, performing, to kind of shutting down my life, self-isolating, planting myself in front of the television with like the remote control and a bag, a bottomless bag of chips, and just not wanting to be around people for a long time. And my self-confidence went down, my self-esteem went down. I definitely didn't want to laugh, cough, or sneeze. I had tried watching some comedies, and it actually hurt my lung where it had been. They had cut a portion off of it and like sewed it back, and it actually hurt to do that. So I had reached a point in my life where, like, it's weird to say, but like I hated to laugh, like I didn't want to laugh. And so it took about a year for me to really think about what the doctor said about laughter helping my lung heal. And that's when I Googled laughter in Richmond, and what I found was laughter yoga being offered at a church over near VCU, and I didn't know anything about it at the time. The few videos that I saw online looked pretty weird, and what I found later was that unconditional laughter really doesn't translate very well to video. It tends to trigger a lot of things in us around, like when we were laughed at as when we were younger, or things that don't feel comfortable, or times we laughed when it wasn't appropriate to laugh, all that kind of stuff. And so I wasn't sold on going to my first session, but what I thought was like laughter yoga. I love yoga, so I brought my yoga mat, and I love to laugh, and so I memorized a bunch of jokes. So I figured we were going to do yoga poses and tell jokes. Obviously, what I said before, it's nothing like that. And so even 10 minutes in, I was like, when are we going to tell the jokes? I was really excited to tell these jokes I'd memorized. My mat sat in the corner, but within 10 minutes, some amazing things happened, and they say that within around the 10-minute mark is when a lot of the benefits of laughter yoga kick in.
Wow.
So one, I could feel oxygen being pushed into parts of my body where it had never gone before. And so I could actually feel my lung healing within those first 10 minutes. But the biggest thing is that during that year of isolation, it sort of vanished within about 10 minutes. And I left that first session feeling really connected to everyone in the room. And that was a little, I guess, unusual for me, because I had gone to yoga class. I even volunteered for the nonprofit yoga center here in Richmond, and I would oftentimes take a class and never talk to anyone, maybe say hi to one person. I'd go to the gym and never even acknowledge anyone around me. But here I left with feeling like I had 12 really great friends after that first laughter yoga session. Couldn't explain it. I would later learn there's science behind what happens, and kind of tied into what Dr. Brene Brown says about, like, vulnerability being the cradle of experience we all crave, and how that fits into like laughing with strangers and why we feel so connected when we do laugh with strangers. But in terms of my lung healing, I went to 6 sessions after that first one, before the teacher retired. And I could feel my lung healing a little bit more. And, after the 6th session, when she was like, well, I'm retiring and I wanted more, she said I was going to have to get trained myself. But, I did, even up to that point, I really didn't look into, the science behind it and what the benefits are, because I was just enjoying it. And it felt a little strange because it took me outside my comfort zone. Mm. And from what I know now, it's like, wow, when we move outside of our comfort zone, not too far where it causes us to, like, lay fetal on the floor and re-triggers old traumas, but like just enough, it's kind of like the fountain of youth. And so it helps us to feel younger in that way too. Mm. But in terms of like the traditional benefits within the body, so for one, when I lead people in an hour session, they can expect to take, this was before the COVID world sent us all to Zoom, but they can expect to take about 1,300 steps and burn about 600 calories just from laughing. And so I found that when people came to I did an experiment that I'll talk about in a minute, but with laughter yoga for a full year. But people that came to 15 more sessions lost weight, even people in wheelchairs. And so now, even when I do these sessions on Zoom, we after about 10 minutes, it becomes aerobic. And so even though they're sitting, they're not burning 600 calories within an hour. And it's not appropriate to do an hour session on Zoom just because we get fatigued. Right. But if we're doing a half an hour session, they're burning like 70 calories just from laughing, which it is pretty amazing. The other thing is that the doctor hasn't had any kind of respiratory infection or cold since 1995. I almost did it because I was afraid that if I stopped doing it, I would get sick with my lung condition. And so, I haven't had a cold since I started doing laughter yoga. So what the studies show is that it's a booster shot to the immune system. You're basically taking shots of oxygen and overloading the body with breath, and it's kind of boosting up the immune system. We found when participants came from the Richmond Fibromyalgia and Chronic Pain Association, they started coming. They found that they would, after laughing for an hour, they would have pain relief for up to 12 hours, up to like 3 or 4 days, where they were pain free. And a lot of that has to do with this like really wonderful cocktail of chemicals that are released in the body. And one is endorphins, which we get from exercise, but it boosts up with laughter because it ties into the breath and how it moves through the blood. And what we know about endorphins, it's like 10 times the power of morphine. And so it's this really powerful chemical that's released in the body in terms of how it benefits. There's other ones in there like oxytocin that helps us bond to one another within the session, which is where some of that comes from. I guess the last benefit is, well, there's about 5 or 6 benefits, but the one that I like to talk about is like the stress levels just kind of disappear, and we feel a sense of, and it's not like the stress level disappears when we go for a jog. I feel like when we engage in this kind of activity around others with that vulnerability and the stress level goes down, it activates this serenity in the body that I don't think we can get anywhere else.
Do you think it's similar to the feeling of being with a friend that you always laugh with, or do you think that's too simplified?
Yeah. So I say that what I like to tell people is like laughing with a stranger for an hour is the equivalent of going to a coffee shop with that stranger for 7 days for an hour a day and getting to know that person.
Oh, I see.
It's in other things I call it a false sense of intimacy, but it's a real sense of intimacy that forms when we laugh with strangers. I don't think there's been enough studies to really document a lot of that.
Sure.
Yeah,
it's
pretty amazing.
Talk about your experiment.
Yeah.
So what did that look like?
Yeah, so as an artist, I decided I would commit to a year of offering laughter yoga in the Richmond community. And so I found a place to rent, and I created a couple conditions for for my experiment. So one, I would offer it for free as service work in the community, because I know that when we give back, it kind of goes out into the world as a prayer and comes back as a blessing. So it had to be for free. And two, I wouldn't promote it using my name. So traditionally, if people know I'm performing or giving a reading, like in Richmond especially, like 400 or 500 people will show up. And I wanted people to find laughter yoga like I did because they were interested in the work, they were interested in the doctor's work, and not because they wanted to see me perform or entertain. And if I had to entertain for a year and prepare and rehearse, like I don't think I would have made it a year. I was really in a place in my life where I kind of walked away from that life where I was touring 200 days out of the year and really wanted to give back and not have to perform, just be myself in front of people and offer this kind of service as laughter. The third thing was that I would say yes to absolutely every idea I had related to laughter during that year. And so during that year, I took 15 to 20 Laughter Club members on laughter flash mobs. I hosted a bunch of laughter flash mobs where I took them into Lowe's, went to a busy art gallery, we went to a church service, we went to a theatrical event, and we laughed where we weren't supposed to laugh and hopefully not get arrested and then disperse. So traditional flash mob kind of thing. Another thing that I did was that I conducted these as part of the experiment, this portion called Laughing Darshan. So in two busy storefront windows, I put 2 chairs and people could make appointments to sit with me for 3 minutes. So I would sit in the window for 1 hour each day for 7 days, and then I would move to a different window. So they would come in, there were directions there. They would sit across from me. We would look at each other for a minute. We would laugh for a minute. We would look at each other for a minute, and then they would leave. And so that became very meta. It's like, okay, what does it feel like to laugh with this person? Then what does it feel like to have other people observe me laughing? Yeah. And so as an artist, I was really interested. As an artist, most of my work has involved like, putting myself into these kind of self-imposed experiments, not to write about them, not even to do interviews or talk about them, but just because that's how I enjoy life and how I understand life and get to know myself a little bit better. Right. And so, one of the last things I did was I began to offer laughter yoga to warm up entertainment events. And so Firehouse Theater let me into their theater. They were doing Moliere's Invalid for the entire month. And so I would go in front of the audience and warm them up with 5 minutes of laughter yoga, and then the cast would come out and perform. And so we tracked like what was the laughter like without the laughter yoga, what was it like? And we found that, man, people, when when the audience is prepped with laughter yoga before an entertainment event. I also did one at Positive Vibe Cafe for Senator Tim Kaine's band. He has like a band that no one knows about, but like I was invited to warm up his audience before the band. So I got to do music, I got to do theater where I warmed up the audience with laughter yoga, and it was really cool. The audience is just chomping at the bit to laugh and clap once they've been warmed up. It was pretty cool. Yeah. So with this experiment, those were the conditions. That's what I did. So I didn't care really if one person showed up, because I had come from a world where I performed in front of 300 people, 5,000 people on a regular basis. To me, it wasn't about the numbers. So I didn't care if 3 people showed up each week or 1,000 people showed up each week. And so by the end of that year, I had established programs at through the U.S. Departments of Veterans Affairs, at the Childhood Cancer Foundation, the thing is that 10,000 people had come through the sessions that I had done, not expecting it, not even concerned with the numbers. And it's interesting because almost to the day that I ended, I showed up on Dr. Kataria's radar, and he called me up and he goes, "Wow, we'd love to present you with this award in India. Can you come out here?" And I love traveling, but India has never been on even my bucket list. And so I was actually scared to go there. But he's like, "Come out here and you can study with me, and I'll show you some of the new stuff that we're doing." And so I did. Right after I finished my experiment, I went out to India and hung out with him for a month and studied with him to find out the newest kind of things that he was doing. And that's when I had an epiphany of like feeling that this could really work well in treatment centers for addiction, all kinds of addiction. Definitely. And so I came back from India and went and took myself right into the addiction centers and began to work with that population.
I want to hear more about that, but I do have a question. We are at least in the West, and I've never been to the East, so I don't know if this is different, but we're so conditioned, so socialized to not make too much sound, right? And especially if you're white and middle class, that is a sort of a central tenet of existing in that body, in that space. How do you combat that feeling that I can't take up too much vocal space? I can't interrupt the piece, the quiet. And two, the one time I've been in yoga and the young lady was like, okay, we're going to try something. We're all going to laugh and it's going to be fake. It just felt so beyond inauthentic. And then it made me angry. I didn't even feel like it was silly. I was like, screw you, girl. Like, we just had a good time together and then you're ruining it with this? Sure. How do you, and I like being loud, so that's not it for me. It was just like, ew, this is so fake. How do you create buy-in for those people? Yeah. And then we can talk about addiction, because I totally want to know about that.
So in India, I would wander around during my days, and I would go in the parks there, and I would just say, hey, does anybody want to do laughter yoga? Mm-hmm. And I would have like 40 or 50 people join me in these parks. And so I feel like it's interesting that yoga started in India, because like there's such a like lack of space, and there's such like everyone's on top of each other that they need this like kind of peaceful feeling. And so it was very easy. If I went to a park here, which I've never done, like I doubt anyone would join me. They would probably run the other way, you know, but it was so easy there. And so I feel that, you know, for most people that do traditional yoga, laughter yoga is like this, you know, especially here in the West, we think of yoga as the asanas, the poses, and that's what we think of it as. And anything beyond that that's not yoga, really. That must be religious, or that must be something else. But yoga is when I go there and I just can tune out the world and do all my poses and not talk to anyone and leave. Yeah. And so for most yogis that are rooted in that, laughter yoga is a big shock, and traditionally they won't gravitate to that. And so your question was like, how do you get the buy-in? Yeah. So I'd say, so during that year when 10,000 people came through, I did a lot of festivals and conferences and things like that, where there's a group of people just kind of trying this new thing. They wouldn't try it otherwise. And so this might give you an idea. Only 1 in 20 people that try laughter yoga ever come back. And so it's really not for everyone. It's so intimate when we laugh with strangers, and it makes us feel so vulnerable. It can, and I think in a culture where it's rooted not so much in narcissism, but narcissistic personality disorder, right. Where that's not really about intimacy and connection. And kind of tying it into addiction, they say the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Yeah. And we love feeling kind of disconnected, and anything that interrupts that, kind of like you said, it makes us a little angry. Yeah. I would feel that in traditional yoga classes when they would have us partner up. And me being usually like one of the like few guys in class, I would feel this vibe sometimes of like all the women are looking down. They don't want to work with the one guy in class. I probably felt like a lot of women feel when they're like the minority in a group of somewhere else. But like, I never felt comfortable during those things, because I was like, I just want to do my poses in these classes and leave. I don't want to like interact and like, you know, be working with other people. That's not what this is about for me. Right. So laughter yoga the same way. Okay. Never had someone left a session, but like I'm saying, 19 people out of any session are not coming back.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So this is a really niche caretaking sort of technique then, I sense.
Yeah. So at least during the year that I did it, and it could be that the laughter teacher attracts a type of student to them, I'd say of the one person that comes back, they're coming to every session forever. And so you build this really loyal tribe that falls in love with it, you know? And so probably 90% of the people that were drawn to my sessions were introverts. Oftentimes they would bring an extroverted partner, and they wouldn't like it. It was like extroverts like, we can extrovert everywhere. We don't need like this space to do it. Where introverts like, we don't have anywhere to like extrovert. We feel this is a really safe place to do it. We really feel comfortable here doing it that way. So,
wow.
Yeah.
We can extrovert anywhere.
Yeah. And it's true. Like you can extrovert anywhere in the world. Like, so.
I've never heard it said that way. Though I think that both my partner and my best friends would say that I extrovert everywhere. Okay, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about addiction specifically. So you went to India, and if I'm hearing you correctly, that was the moment that you made that connection, or was that a connection you'd made prior to your time with the doctor?
When I was in India, I was taught what's called the laughter yoga meditation sequence.
Okay.
Very different than laughter yoga. Laughter yoga, we get together in groups. We do it in clubs. And the reason we do it in these free clubs is because I think if people did it alone at work, someone might call and be like, what's going on there? That person's going crazy, or your roommate or your parents, or someone's going to feel like it's not okay just to laugh without using jokes, comedy, or humor. So we're doing these clubs. Laughter yoga meditation is a 10-minute sequence you can do daily on your own, where you it's a little bit different than laughter yoga, whereas laughter yoga is we're doing these exercises and then the deep yoga breathing in between exercises. That's where the yoga part comes in. Laughter yoga meditation is you're doing traditional yoga breaths, 5 of them, and then combining it with 5 different types of laughs every morning, and you get that 10 minutes and then you go on your way. And so it occurred to me, so my kind of I guess connection to addiction is I was raised in a family that suffers from addiction. We have 6 addicts in our family. And so my father got into AA when I was like 11, and so I started going to Alateen very early on. And so I come from addiction from the perspective of a family member who's been affected his whole life by this kind of like bizarre kind of habit in the world. And so I found that the people in the rooms, we call them the rooms where most people go to 12-step recovery. And it's interesting because of about the 13,000 treatment centers that existed before COVID, 90% of them used the 12 steps as their model. So there's no alternatives. And so what we know from the 12 steps is that only 3% of the people find sobriety through the 12 steps. So that leaves 97% of people out to lunch. And then of those 97% of the people, like most of them have some kind of problem with churches. And so right there, like they're already veering off where like, this isn't going to work. And even if it does work, I got a problem being in a church basement the whole time. But you have all these treatment centers kind of using this model based on the 12 steps because there's no alternative model. And so to me, I think about like, okay, if McDonald's sold a sandwich that 97% of the people got sick, like how long would they keep offering it? Yet we keep offering this like kind of antiquated mode of finding sobriety through the 12 steps, which just doesn't work. And so what I found in my experience with the rooms is like a lot of people. So step 11 says, I want to get into the step, but you're seeking through meditation, like conscious contact with something bigger than you. Meditation. And so what I found in the rooms is that most people are doing something meditative like. It's the one step where they really been. And so they'll say, well, I meditate through gardening, and I meditate through going on a run or fishing. And so those are meditative things. But what we know about the brain and neuroplasticity is like the brain will change. Like the neural pathways change through meditation. I don't think they change through meditative things. Like I don't think someone's brain's going to change if they're like gardening 40 hours a week. But if they're sitting down and doing the traditional meditation where they like stare at a wall till they can't feel their legs and like sit in silence, the brain is going to definitely change. And the science, there's been so much science that like kind of confirms that. And so knowing that that's the big hurdle, and that's the big kind of like amazing magical thing that can take someone from like addiction to sobriety and connection, is the meditation. I began to have that epiphany where maybe laughter yoga meditation can be kind of the secret to getting people to meditate on a regular basis. And so that was really the epiphany that I had. And I was like, I want to take laughter yoga meditation into the treatment centers and just see it, kind of conduct another experiment. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to follow the laughter and see what happens.
Sure. So then is that how your practice here in Richmond began? Or, okay, so
you mean
is...
for in the addiction clinics?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when I got back from India, it's interesting because during that year, I knocked on a lot of doors that I eventually got into in terms of like, I'd love to show you a little bit about laughter yoga. Usually I'd have to send them a brochure and audition and explain it. And, you know, it took me almost a year and a half to get involved with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. They didn't like that it was called laughter. They didn't like it was called yoga. Like, let's change the name. Like, this doesn't really fit the model of Western medicine. I was like knocking on these treatment doors, and they were opening the door saying, come in, before I could even like explain. And I would be like, do you want me to tell you about it? No, 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 come on in.
Yeah.
We'd love it. And I think because, at least in that world, we really still don't know why one person gets sober after going through treatment once, and one person, you know, goes through 17 treatment centers and dies at the end. And I feel like there's a real honesty there in saying, like, we really don't know what works. This could be a missing ingredient for some people. Like, bring it on. And so that's what I did, and that's where I've been working ever since. So.
Okay. So then tell me about Laughter Yoga Richmond in its current state. What does it look like in your day-to-day, I guess, in running your practice?
So I do, so, you know, it's interesting because the experiment that I did and still doing in the addiction centers, it went from me kind of just following the laughter, let me see what I can develop here, into now where I'm at, like a year and a half later, going like, wow, maybe this is a contribution I can make to the field of addiction studies.
Sure.
With laughter yoga. And so now, you know, especially since COVID, it's like, okay, what do I want to say about it? What do I want to write about it? What do I want to tell people about it? And what kind of training program can I develop so I can help other people do that as well? So a lot of time now, so I do about 2 sessions a week online, Zoom, with in treatment centers. And the rest of that time is spent developing kind of this back end stuff where it's like, you know, working on the book and working on this training program so I can help other people get trained and go into the centers as well.
Wow. So then what would you say specifically for addiction? So I know that if I, just a normal person, go to laughter yoga, I will experience higher levels of all the good chemicals that make me feel better. If I'm a person who is addictive or struggling with addiction, or even is a recovering addict, how is my experience of laughter yoga different or more beneficial? Or yeah.
So the first year I worked in an addiction center for substance abuse. That's like alcohol and drug. And then the next year I began to merge into populations where it was more activity addiction. So that could be addictions to gaming, the internet, sex, shopping, exercise, and work. And so, you know, it began to change as the population changed in terms of this, you know, how it looked and how it could benefit. But, you know, I think one of the biggest things that I bring to it as a storyteller and someone who's also a laughter yogi now too, is that I feel like nothing harms sobriety more than what we call the recovery story. And so the recovery story, for those who don't know what it is this story that you tell in terms of like what it was like before you got sober, what brought you into like the sober world, and what it's like now. And it works really well. And from a storytelling standpoint, storytelling 101, it's like a really great way with a beginning, middle, and end to package it up. But what happens when we know the science of storytelling is that what happens with that is it doesn't allow the like hard drive in the brain to ever clear. And so when we're telling the story over and over again, we're bonding with failures with other people who feel that same failure. And it's almost like we're re-traumatizing the body just to stay at this one level. And so that's huge because the biggest part of the recovery program is telling these stories. You know, they even have 12-step meetings where it's just a meeting where you hear someone's story. And so that kind of traps people in this really like story of the past, and it doesn't allow them to get that. So with laughter yoga, we create this new story where it's based on laughter, and it becomes this very positive thing. But early on, I was looking for ways to hack kind of the storytelling science, I guess, chemicals that are released in the body. So what I wanted to do was like, so cortisol is like the stress hormone. And most laughter yogis are trying to get rid of cortisol to lower stress. But I found with cortisol, if you tell a story and it gets people like really intense, like it's what creates memories. And so you want to create boosts in the cortisol so the memory will stick. And like if you're just telling like a recovery story and you're telling people these awful things that you've been through and that happened to you, you're raising the cortisol level, but you're not doing anything with it. So I want to push on the cortisol level with like on the gas. I want to push everyone up to get to that level. And like, if if you're raised around addiction like I am, you have all kinds of horrific stories that will like traumatize anyone, and I think most of us do anyway. But in the addiction world, we have more than most. And then you want people to connect rather than disconnect, and so you have to ride the brake pedal. And so what you're doing, you want to raise the cortisol level, and then like raise the oxytocin level, and then lower the cortisol level, so it sticks in there.
Wow.
And so there's stories that you can use, and I found this through my storytelling group. There's stories that you can use where there's like the hero is trying to triumph, and then there's some kind of resolution. It's very different than the traditional recovery story. And so,
Wow.
So that I was looking on it at that level in terms of like, that's just one area where I began to look to see if we can help affect the neuroplasticity in the brain with
Right.
people that are addicted to things.
Can you tell me like what the first thing you say in a session is besides your name? I'm just so curious what it would actually look like. What do you do?
Yeah. So the session itself is kind of mimics a story as well. It has a beginning, middle, and end, and that structure is really important because the lives coming in there for this kind of medicine have been chaotic at best. And so this is one portion of that, one big portion of what I call the addiction activity treatment program, is that happiness should never be a part of the conversation, that we begin to use this different language, just like Starbucks. If you're in Starbucks and you ask for a medium coffee, they're like, oh, no, it's not medium. I don't
know what it is.
It's like grande or venti or something like that.
Okay.
But they correct you. It's this new language they're trying to like get you to buy into as a community. And as a community, like people are like kind of loyal to it, and they love the brand because they get to speak this special language only there. And so this language that we're using instead of happiness, which happiness is sort of dependent on these external factors, external validation, which in the addiction world, this is huge. Always trying to use something out here to make us happy. So we're going to use the word joyful now. Yeah. And so the beginning of each session starts with, if it's the beginning, the very first session, we're looking into like, where's that joy hiding in our body? And like, for a lot of times we have to track it down. Is it behind our knees and our foot? And like, where is it? And kind of attuning a lot of the participants to like recalibrate joy in their body. But we're using joy from that moment on. We're never using the word happy at all.
Right.
Which I think is, I mean, it's to me, we're tending to live in a world now where we're like getting rid of a lot of outdated words and things. Like when I was growing up over on Brook Road, the children's hospital was called the Crippled Children's Hospital. Yeah. And so I think happy is the same. It's a weird, but it's happy is the same way. It's tied into that same thing. And this may not have a lot, maybe it has a lot to do with it, maybe it doesn't, but like I went back and tracked down the word happy, and like you look at the founding fathers when they were writing the Declaration of Independence. And so one of the first phrases that they use is the pursuit of
happiness.
Yeah. So in the first draft, it was actually the pursuit of a state, which was, land. And then they changed that to outward possessions. And then at the last minute, they were like, well, outward possession doesn't work. I think happiness is synonymous with outward possession. And so to me, the founding fathers set up like our society to like succeed, but all the future participants who might be addicted, set them up to fail, because it's all about happiness through outward possessions. And so
they set a lot of us up to fail.
What's that?
I said they set a lot of us up to fail.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Actually, while for me, church was more of a source of trauma than it was healing, I learned a lot of what you just said growing up in evangelicalism, that I shouldn't seek happiness because happiness depended on others. Joy comes in the morning because joy is with you when you wake up because it belongs to you. Happiness does not. Joy is yours. And I remember like walking out of church one night and being like, my life really sucks, but I own joy. That's really cool, Yeah. And so I'm amazed that I see any parallel in my evangelical megachurch to what you were talking about right now. That's
when
incredible.
You said that, I kind of went like, I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to get rid of the word joy now because it's connected to the church.
Yeah, and wow, that's really cool.
But that theory, that kind of that idea I came up with was like, okay, we have 1.5 gallons, give or take, of blood in our body. I think it's the same with joy. Whether we're happy or whether we're like sad or they have money, whether we're like injured, the blood in our body doesn't change. I don't think the amount of joy does too, but the happiness is like just dependent on all this like crap that you buy at Walmart kind of.
Yeah. Target, but all right.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's amazing. So yeah, joy comes in the morning. Maybe don't ever use that phrase. It's very Christianese.
I'll stay away from that.
Yeah, stay away from that one. But I'm curious, sort of, it sounds like people come to you for your services. Do you host just sort of regular, anybody can come laughter sessions, or is that not part of your practice right now?
Yeah, so I do both.
You do both,
And
okay.
so the nice thing about working in the treatment centers is it's done anonymously. And so I don't have to like take Facebook pictures, and it's not all about promotion. And it feels, in this world where everything is out here, it feels private and nice. So I do community sessions. And so I do sessions, free sessions once a month through the Heartfulness Institute, which is a meditation center over on Perham Road.
Yeah.
And so every third Sunday of the month, we do those. And that's for laughter yoga meditation.
Okay.
It's a 45-minute session. And we just added a new one. Things have changed with the COVID stuff. But Libby Mill Library will be hosting one every first Wednesday of the month throughout the rest of the year.
Wow.
When COVID hit and we were over there, we were maxing out capacity there. I was doing one community session there a month, and probably 100 people were coming to that one. And it's amazing to be in a room with 100 people, most who haven't ever practiced this before, and like the connections and bonds that form. You know, hopefully we'll get back to that world where we can do that. But laughing is a pretty intimate thing, and like you're kind of exchanging fluids really close to people. And so even I think the transition will be from going from Zoom to doing it in person and staying seated when we do it,
Sure.
and then eventually maybe moving around. So.
Okay. So then when you begin a session, you give us a central language to sort of join around, and we begin from there. You said something earlier that I am really interested in. You said 5 kinds of laughter. What does that mean?
With the laughter yoga meditation, we're pairing
Okay.
5 traditional like yogic breaths with like
Okay.
5 different kinds of laughter. And
What
so
are they?
what's that?
What are they?
So I'll just mention a few of them.
Okay.
So when we do like quiet laughter, it's almost like we're in the library. You know, it's constricting the throat in a different way. It's allowing the breath to move in a very different way in the
Right.
body, right?
Yeah.
When we do a type of laughter that we stretch out the body this way, it's going to open up the heart and lungs. And so there's a laughter where we do this. So the mainstay of the laughter yoga meditation and laughter yoga is the sound of ho and ha. And so ho, ho, it's mimicking that deep belly laugh, but ho moves the diaphragm up and down. And then the ha, ha is moving the lungs out and to the side. And so when we combine these together, the ho, ho, ha, ha, ho, ho, ha, ha, in different rhythms, it's allowing the diaphragm and the ribs to move in conjunction with each other. Yeah. And so there's these all very specific types of laughter that sound like, oh, it just sounds like a theatrical kind of game that we're doing. But when you look at the intention behind it, it's what it's doing to the body. It becomes like really different. Because a lot of these things are things that I did as a storyteller when I would take it into schools and do workshops in the theater. But the intention's like just different. And I think intention is everything almost. And also humming too, which is like there's a whole like segment on like where you're humming for like 3 minutes straight, which begins to work in the nasal cavities and releases this thing in the body. So
I'm curious about how your practice affects your own laughter and its authenticity. And you've laughed exactly twice, and I feel very honored that you've laughed exactly twice at me, 3 times. So, I mean, do you ever get tired of laughing?
no, but it's interesting. Like, you know, you just said you've laughed at me exactly twice, and I laughed at that. But if I was going to go back and be like, I think that's a funny line, I'm going to use it somewhere else. So I would go up to a stranger and be like, you laughed at me exactly twice. Like, it's not going to work. But in that moment, I think when we get to some kind of truth, it's funny. And when we share that truth. And so there's a lot of reasons why we laugh at things. You know, all these studies, there's like 10 different reasons and philosophies. But like, I think there's a truth that makes us laugh and like makes us feel connected. You know, that, and whatever you said on those true things, if you repeated them, I probably wouldn't laugh again. But in that moment, it was like, it did encourage laughter. And so I think in laughter yoga, we're doing the simulated laughter to get to the real and genuine laughter after that. So we're doing all these exercises, not to simulate laughter, even though that will get health benefits, but it's to get to like the real stuff in between, to those real and true pieces in between. When you put it all together in like a 60-minute session, you might have like 40 good minutes of laughter, but and like I'd say about 30% is fake and then 70% is real. You're trying to get to that 70%, like the real stuff, you know?
Sure.
So did you ask me a question in that?
I did, yeah.
Oh, how has it affected my laughter? So, so get this. So when I first started as my experiment as a laughter yoga leader at the time, I'm so passionate about things and so intense about things. I wanted to be the loudest laughter and the longest laughter that I got migraines for like after the first 5 weeks. And my friends were like, how's it going? I was like, it sucks. Like, I hate this. And I really had to back off. And it was about a mindfulness practice around laughter that I just needed to back off a little bit and allow the laughter to come when it would and not when it wouldn't. And so a lot of times after that, I found myself in class just doing this, ha, 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 until the real laughter came, that I didn't need to push it, that I could allow it to develop naturally. So within that period, like I met the woman who would eventually became my wife. She came to a lot of sessions. And so we ended up, you know, especially during the second year, she got pregnant. And so my daughter grew up with these weekly laughter yoga sessions. Wow. And so it's really cool because like, she's like, maybe all babies laugh, but like, this is one thing. A lot of people ask me all the time, like, how can I bring more laughter into my life? And I say, just take one thing that you normally do and laugh. And so my daughter, every time she sneezes, she laughs. And so it cracks us all up. And so now I've started, like every time I sneeze, I laugh too, because she's got me in the habit. But it's that simple. That's how you bring more laughter into your life. Like every time you take a sip of tea, you just laugh for that few seconds. It's not about like putting something else on your list and you're not going to do it or do it. It's just every time you start your car, just laugh for that few seconds. Cool. And then all of a sudden, like you've got all this laughter in your life, you know? So that's how it's affected me. And it's kind of, I think given me a sense of peace and changed my neurochemistry. So I don't have to worry about like going back to a world where I may not be sober, you know? Right.
Cool. It sounds like a version of habit stacking. Have you heard of this theory? I think you might like it. I've been doing this my whole life, and I did not know that it was actually a positive, like, mental health coping skill. So I'll do this thing where I'm like, okay, I really want to have a snack, but I really need to grade these 2 papers because these kids are waiting on their grades, right? So I'll finish the 2 grading things, and then I get to have my snack. And actually, this is like a good way for minds that are very expansive, like my own, that spend a lot of time in a lot of different places, to make sure that we get all the things done that we need to get done. So it sounds like you're habit stacking. So I want to drink this cup of tea. Okay, I'm going to drink it, and then I'm going to laugh. Every time I turn on my car, I'm going to laugh. And so it sounds like you're just doing this thing that's actually super healthy to do, but with laughter, you know? Yeah. That's awesome.
And the doctor always said that doing laughter yoga would improve your sense of humor. You just find more to laugh at, you know? And so it's gotten me into trouble now because especially with my family, there's a lot of drama in my family, but like I'll tend to laugh at things now, and it tends to make, I have to leave the room to laugh. It used to be before I would like, if you're putting on the boxing gloves, I'm putting them on too. Yeah. You know, like then we're going to get into it. It plays out on Facebook all the time, like rather than this conversation, people are just offended. But like now instead of putting on the boxing gloves, I have this really beautiful option. It's good and bad because people don't like to be laughed at, but I have to leave sometimes because it's just ridiculous. So I start laughing, and
That's
it can
awesome.
make people madder. The doctor always says like, yeah, you don't want to use laughter as an option or argument because you're going to get punched.
Right.
So
yeah.
But it's nice that it causes the brain to pause for me anymore, where it's like, oh, I have another option I never had before. And it becomes, I feel like when we're talking about addiction, that pause allows us to choose another option sometimes.
Interesting. So do you think that's something that distinguishes laughter yoga for addiction treatment from other treatments? Because I have heard that before, that there's that moment of choice, and that's, I think in the 12 steps, don't they talk about like that's a moment kind of God gives you or something like that, and
maybe
it's like divine almost.
If it has the word God, it sounds like
right. The 12 steps to you. Yeah. Okay.
One of the exercises that are really a key component in the laughter yoga addiction treatment program is what are called value-based exercises. Sure. And we take something that is tends to trigger people, and we use it as a homeopathic remedy. And so here's an easy one. We do argument laughter. And so we're going to point our fingers, and for the next 15 seconds, we're going to laugh like, ha, 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 ha. So that's one. We also do cell phone laughter. In traditional laughter yoga, we would just pick up the cell phone and laugh for 15 seconds into the phone, ha, 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 ha. But now what we're going to do is we're going to imagine ourselves seeing a number from our ex, from the IRS, from something that makes our stomach drop. We're going to sink into that feeling. Then we're going to laugh in it. And so we're going to use all these triggers within the treatment program and then introduce laughter to them.
Wow.
And we find that begins to make the shift really clearly. We do one with letters because you get the letter from your ex or the IRS or your bank statement, your credit card that you can't pay, and it causes that sinking feeling. These are feelings that traditionally cause us to revert to habits that may like hit our sobriety. And so there's magic in these kind of homeopathic remedies, introducing a small part of the ailment so we can use it to like reprogram our brains. And so that's a big part of the treatment there.
That's astounding.
Yeah.
Astoundingly cool. I'm very excited to read your book whenever it's ready.
Yeah, thanks.
And as an English teacher, send it to me for proofreads.
Okay.
So I really am excited to read your book. Okay, so the best question that I get to ask here is, and I sent it to you in my email, is how can I take your specialized knowledge and bring it to my neighbors? Not necessarily my, active addiction neighbors or my recovering addiction neighbors, but all of my neighbors. What do you/Coleman know that I can take to everyone and give to them as a gift?
Well, the cool thing about what I have to answer it in kind of an indirect, tangential way. So the cool thing about these addiction treatment centers where I'm working at is in the 12-step program, they call it a fellowship. Oh, we have this worldwide fellowship, which triggers a lot of people because fellowship is attached to church. Well, we have this worldwide, these free laughter yoga clubs that are worldwide now, and even on Zoom. And so it creates this different way for people to connect. And so whether you're addicted to something or not, we have now people side by side. And so if we look at the rates of addiction, which is like 1 in every 8 people is addicted to something in the United States. That means if I have a group that I'm working with, with like 20 or 30 people, that means like there's a bunch of people in there that are going to be struggling. And so the cool thing about laughter yoga is the doctor didn't want to have a big buy-in for people. It's like a 3 days of class, 2.5 days with classes and $300, and he wants you to go out there and teach it. And that's why it spread so far and so fast. He doesn't really even care if you get the certification. He's like, watch some YouTube videos and then just take it to your family and do some of these exercises, ones that you're drawn to. So yeah, we are certified through Laughter Yoga University, but we're talking about laughter here. It's just like, a lot of people will come to me and say, I watched some YouTube videos and I've been doing it at my work and it's going great. And I was wondering if you could like give me some tips. And I'm like, well, it sounds like you're already doing it. And so that's a fantastic way. You Google laughter yoga, find a couple exercises that you're drawn to, and just introduce them to your family. You
make that sound very easy. That's really cool. That's really cool.
But, and even that sounds a little formal. I think the bigger key is that I feel that laughter is a service work. And so it's almost like you're volunteering when you share laughter in the world. And so if I'm in CVS and I hear someone laughing, it like makes me pause, and sometimes I'll laugh, or if I'm not feeling right, I'll feel like if they're laughing at me, but usually it like uplifts everything around me. And so when we laugh in public, whether you're starting your car or taking a sip of tea, if we're laughing in here, someone over there is like, wow, they're having a good time, and it uplifts them as well. So I think anytime we have the opportunity to laugh unconditionally in public is something that we can do.
I'm reflecting on that now. I have a particularly silly best friend / roommate, and we laugh constantly. And I think we do get those like benefits because we laugh at nothingness all the time together. But now I am realizing that often we get stared at in public because we are taking up too much space, right? Because we're happy when we're together. And especially in this like masked world. We went to Target last night for our girls' night. And we're just wandering around being dumb, talking in accents, being silly with each other. And I took a picture of her, Heather, and there's this woman in the background, and she's like, and then we saw it, and / we laughed so hard in front of her, like at her kind of, but in front of her because we didn't realize that we were upsetting people by being happy in public. Wow. I'm really going to have to like think about this now.
There's a new study that just came out last month from a university in England that shows that when people film a laughy, which is like a selfie, but them laughing, and they post it, they say that it encourages, it gets laughter from 90% of the people that view it, and laughter that's longer in duration than a typical joke, and it may last up to 20 to 30 seconds from a laughy, which I haven't tested it, but
you should. Could be one of your next experiments.
Yeah.
Speaking of what's next, because we are running out of time.
Yeah.
What's next for you? What's the new thing that you're chasing?
So right now, like upcoming, I have a webinar about what I'm doing right now called Redefining Addiction and Recovery through Laughter Yoga.
Wow.
And so I'm looking to probably go on a tour through treatment centers and just kind of educate people on using laughter yoga as kind of this support for what's out there, and also just as just to tell people more about unconditional laughter, really.
Wow.
So that's what's next.
And when's the book coming out?
Probably. So that book is on a plate. There's 2 other books in front of it.
So many books.
Yeah.
Okay, but we'll hear about it.
Yeah.
Cool. And so
it's probably over a year away. So.
Okay. Yeah. Every year feels like a million years, and also like one afternoon nowadays. So, where do we go to find you? On the internet, or do we call a number? How do we find you?
Yeah. So the best place is laughteryoga.com.
Okay.
.com.
Laughteryoga.com. Very cool.
And if you're interested in learning more about laughter yoga meditation, you can go to laughteryogameditation.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I've got a kind of a master class just on that. It's like a 6-week course where people can kind of learn to do the laughter yoga meditation on their own and use it as a daily practice for themselves.
Wow. So. Really cool. Well, this is awesome. I learned so much. Thank you so much, Slash.
You're welcome.
Yeah.